Hi, I'm Brian. Welcome to Autogefühl and welcome to a very special preview, behind the scenes look at the brand new Cayenne Coupe. 2002 is when the Porsche Cayenne first hit the markets, and since then there have been an awful lot of changes. Now in its third generation, Porsche have finally decided it's time for a coupe version. Well, that's quite a radical departure in styling terms, but for lovers of the front of this car, you'll be delighted to hear that almost nothing has changed when it comes to the coupe. The styling is still very distinctively Porsche and very distinctively Cayenne. Bold, aggressive, stylish, sporty, lovely at the front. But what's going on when we come around to the side and we start seeing some of those coupe stylings? Let's take a closer look. At first glance, you can immediately pick up the 911 design cues that have gone into the creation of this coupe. We have such an aggressive sweep now on the roofline that the whole aesthetic of the car has completely changed from the standard Cayenne. If I walk into shot a little bit, then we can see the first most noticeable place in which that has changed. This A-pillar is lowered, as has the window line, by 20 millimeters. That's approximately that much, and it really brings the design straight through into this lovely curve. Now, before we go further back on the car, I want to point out a couple of things here. Standardly, this car is going to come with 20-inch wheels. Here we have a special lightweight pack, so these are 22 inches. In styling terms, I think you'd have to agree they make a very bold statement. The other thing that's different stylistically about this lightweight pack is the contrasting wheel trim here. Now, if you just go with the standard model, you'll get matching body color paint. And on the subject of paint, I think it's well worth pointing this out. This is lava orange, and fans of the 911 will already know and love this color, and I think it suits this design fantastically. When you look at this contrasting wheel arch, which only serves to accentuate these massive wheels, it also narrows your visual aesthetic of the color from the side, which really has you looking at it thinking, that looks very familiar to the 911. As you come further back and you look at this swooping roofline that cuts right through into the back, there are a couple of other really important changes that have happened here. These shoulders are now broader. This has been redesigned at the rear to accommodate lower rear seats. Now, we all know with coupe rooflines, the standard problem is they're great until you have to sit in the back. Well, Porsche have thought of that, so these seats are now 30 millimeters lower. That's about that much if you're unfamiliar with metric, and it makes a huge difference to the way that the rear works. This is now 18 millimeters wider in the shoulders. That's a significant difference. And as the top tapers through into the back and the side follows round, you can see just what a difference that makes to the aesthetic of the car. I'm going to stand back so you can drink it in one more time before we go around and take a look at the rear. Round at the back again, you can see just how different this coupe styling is. We have a really nicely matched top spoiler, but slightly lower down. We have an adaptive spoiler that comes up by 135 millimeters when you're going at speeds over 90 kilometers per hour. We're going to take a closer look at that in action a little bit later on. But for now, you can see from the rear just quite what a difference those 18 millimeters make to the width of these shoulders. It really gives it a big visual presence. Also slightly different, You have a look down, you can now see that the number plate has been integrated into the lower part of the bumper, and that really makes the car sit very low aesthetically on the road. Nice carbon effect rear air diffusers, and look at these tailpipes. Solid, no fakery at all, really nicely finished. If you spend any time hanging out on Porsche forums, which probably tells you more about me than it does about the car, you'll know that the rear spoiler of Porsches causes more argument than almost anything else. So it took Porsche a long time before they decided how best to integrate this into the design. One of the main issues with the coupe design from an aerodynamic standpoint is that you're missing an awful lot of downforce on the rear axle through the design. The rear spoiler takes care of a lot of that, but how to integrate it in a way in which it practically works and aesthetically still works with the design is incredibly challenging. I think they've done a phenomenal job with this. Not only does it really work from an engineering standpoint, but if you look at the car aesthetically from any angle, it really doesn't look as if it's not supposed to be there. It's actually a really nice design element in its own right. So if you imagine sitting behind one of these, it's going to put a big smile on your face. Hopefully, when you drive it and it's up, it's going to put an even bigger smile on your face. We'll be taking a look at the standard model as well, so you can see the full glass panoramic roof. But for now, we really wanted to show you the carbon roof. This is one of the lighter finishes of the car. It's important because it saves a lot of weight. 20 kilos is the difference between this and the glass panoramic roof. So obviously, you're going to have to ask yourself, what's more important to you? Having that lovely skylight above you, or getting the absolute most out of the performance? Let's take a look and see what's powering this thing. Well, I can tell you that from launch, you're going to have the option of two different engines. Here you can see the big beast. This is a 4-litre V8 twin turbo producing 550 horsepower and 770 newton meters of torque. Now that is going to give you a 0 to 100 kilometer per hour speed of 3.9 seconds, a top speed of 286. And I think you'll agree that that is more than fast enough. But if you'd rather save a little bit, then you can get the 6-cylinder turbo 3-litre standard, and that is 340 horsepower, 450 newton meters of torque, and a 0 to 100 time of 6 seconds. However, if you go with the sports lightweight package, then you can reduce that down to 5.9. But come on, it's all about the drive, right? So if you're going to go for it, you need to go for it. All of that power from the engine is being delivered to the wheels by an 8-speed automatic gearbox. Now, that's not a double clutch, and the reason is it's a lot more industrial and a lot more robust, and that means you have more versatility in terms of towing. And if you think all of that is only there for marketing purposes, you may remember back in the day when this became the first SUV to tow a massive plane. You can still watch videos of that on YouTube. It's truly impressive, the amount of power that can be generated here. Because it's an all-wheel drive system, obviously the way in which the power is delivered is key. I think it's particularly interesting to note. You have a look here at the rear brake caliper. Well, that looks perfectly reasonable, perfectly proportionate to the wheel, but have a look at this. A little bit of a change when we get to the front, and that gives you a clue of just how much design has gone into making sure the power management is perfect for this car. Another traditional problem that you always have with coupe designs is the amount of available space in the rear. If we have a look in here, the layout is actually really impressive for a coupe SUV. If I just put my arm in right to the back, you can... the car's brake's not actually on. You can get a really good sense of how much room there is back here. Now, you actually get this rear compartment in two different sizes depending on the spec. It's either 600 or 625 litres of load space, depending if you go with the standard or the turbo. Why the difference? Well, that all comes down to the Bose sound system that is fitted in the rear of the turbos. You can see it's eating up just a little bit of room in the storage well, but nothing too crazy. Obviously, it doesn't impact on the available space up here. I think that there's a huge amount of room, but if you need more, if you drop down those rear seats to allow you the full reach right through to the back, you're talking about over 1,500 litres of load space. And I think that that should prove more than enough for anyone, especially if you're making a change up from a Porsche 911. Key is a very standard Porsche affair, but it's very popular and it's really nice in the hand, so I don't see any reason why that's a problem. As soon as you open the car, you'll see that there is an awful lot here that looks very familiar. That's because a lot of the interior design has been lifted directly from the Cayenne. Now, that could only make sense. Now in its third generation, the design just keeps getting better and better, and this works very nicely. Indeed, that said, there are some very specific personal touches right from the get-go as you have a look in here. Now, we have the lighter weight sports package on this car, which is why you can see we've got carbon detailing elements here. And if Jonas can just swing round to the door, you can see there's also a very particular Cayenne Turbo lit strip on the entrance into the car. So everything here, clean, uncluttered, very functional, very sporty, very stylish, a nice feeling to the finish of materials. We do have completely new seats, and Jonas is just going to take a quick swing round so we can show you those. These have a cloth interior that may look very familiar to you if you are familiar with the 911. They have a leather exterior and a leather top. They are available in different finishes, but this is the one that is particularly specific to this car. Because we have the sports lightweight package, we also have an awful lot of Alcantara here, but we will show you a lot more of that as we actually get into the car. Now, as much as I love the Porsche sports cars, and I do love the Porsche sports cars, I will admit that as I'm getting older, it isn't an entirely bad thing to have that much more room. The nice thing about the SUV design is it does allow you that much more ability to put some real depth and comfort into the driver's experience. These seats feel great right from the get-go. They have plenty of lateral support that really gives you the grip that you want for sporty driving, but at the same time, the depth and comfort that you want for those longer trips. So, the seating position within the car is very sporty indeed. You really do feel that you are in the middle of something that's going to be giving you quite a lot of experience. I'm sure you'll be familiar from the standard SUV coupe experience that the one significant cost as driver is that rear visibility is really not great. Now, for that reason, I think Porsche have included rear view cameras as standard. You don't have to spend extra on them, and that's key, because these cars are always super great when you're going forwards, but the minute you actually need to stop and park one, it can present you with a bit of a challenge. Immediately from sitting in the car and turning over and looking at your blind spot, you become aware of this massive B-pillar. So, okay, there might be a little bit of a compromise for all of that styling on the outside, and all-around visibility is clearly going to be one of those. But you really can feel the benefit visually and aesthetically of that dropped roofline. So I don't have enormous amounts of headspace, but I do have more than enough. I'm 5'10" or 178 centimeters, and as you can see, I have plenty of room here. Irrespective of whether you go with the carbon roof or the glass one, you're not going to be changing the amount of headroom that you have. So I suggest you try both before you make a decision about what you think is most important. Unquestionably, if it's all about the drive, it's got to be the carbon. But the glass roof is very nice indeed. So we're going to take a closer look at that in just a bit. But before we do, have a look at some of the other features that come alongside with that lightweight package. There is Alcantara everywhere. This often divides opinions, Porsche's thing that they put Alcantara on some of their steering wheels. I can tell you, after having taken Porsche for track days, I like this a lot. It provides huge amounts of grip, and it really does give you a very special feel when you're handling the car. I like it. It really does feel a little bit different, a little bit special. But I haven't seen one of these once they've started to age, so I don't know either how many miles you can realistically get off this before it starts to look a little faded, and if it's practical to get it recovered when it does. Well, come on, it's Porsche, so I'm sure there's an option. As far as the interior display is concerned, well, if you're familiar with the modern Porsche layout, this is not going to come as a surprise to you. Everything is very nicely finished, and I'm happy to say that standard for these cars is the Sports Chrono Pack. So that means you have the clock here and also the all-important mode selector down here. So in terms of Porsche evolution, clearly the digital dashboard takes a little bit of adjusting to, but I found it in use to be extremely good here. This still for me requires a little bit of refinement. It's quite hard finding the features that you're actually looking for while you're driving. But that said, you can tell aesthetically as you look further back along the cockpit that the idea really has been a minimalistic design feature. If I turn the car off again, you can see quite how much of that comes to life only when it's switched on. So the idea of the aesthetic is very clean and uncluttered. Lots of those controls are set into here. Now, that looks nice. In terms of its usability, it can be a little bit of a challenge. You can see how much has disappeared now the car has recognized that it's off. And if I switch it back on again, quite how much of it comes to life. Now you can imagine if you're driving down the road at some speed, it's going to take a little bit of getting used to find what you want here, especially because there isn't any immediately obvious tactile point to tell you that you're in the right section of this control panel here. But I will say that the speech support is actually very good on these, so you can do an awful lot of this simply by talking. In terms of the all-important functionality, well, if you are a standard Porsche user, this volume wheel is going to be very familiar to you. Of course, that is echoed on the driver's steering wheel as well, so that's handy. The passenger can get to that, but you have your own as the driver. Heating and cooling controls here are nice, tactile, and easy to access. Now, many of the Porsches have gone with this knurling on their finishing. Interesting to me to note that on the SUVs, we are still staying with this larger gear knob design. I think that's in keeping with the car itself. Feels good in the hand, feels nice and solid, and says, yeah, you know, I might have sports car design, but I'm just a little bit bigger. One of the things I find particularly pleasing in design as we move through generations is how much the different product lines can borrow from each other. So regular users will be familiar with this. If you're not, then this might come as news. It's been a sports car trick for a long time, but as you can see, in the SUV, it also works particularly nicely. As I switch the car off and make an exit, the steering wheel moves up and out of the way and the seat moves back. Now, in a sports car, that's pretty much essential to allow easy access. You don't really need to do that in an SUV, but it is a nice touch, and it just makes you feel a little special when you reach the end of your journey and it's time to get out. Now let's take a look in the rear to see what's happening back here. Well, the first thing to note is these special driver's seats in the front with the integrated headrest. They present just as nicely from the rear as they do from the front. Everything here is very well finished and designed. The rear pocket looks just as stylish as the rest of the seat. Now, it might seem like an unimportant detail, but as this car has been very clearly designed for 4 full adults to sit in, you really want that quality to resonate through in the rear as well. Now, talking of that, here we have special seats in the back, and I'm delighted to see these. Why? Well, ordinarily, you often find in sporty cars that all of the design work and effort has gone into the front and the backseat passengers have been a little bit forgotten. So I'm really happy to feel how supportive these rear seats are. If the front driver is having a lot of fun, then you as the backseat driver get nicely held where you want to stay as well. Now, remember when we were taking a look at the exterior and I told you that the rear seats had dropped by 30 millimeters? Well, that makes this a pleasant experience back here. Again, 5 feet 10 in height or 178 centimeters. That's me. And I can tell you that I am comfortable back here. And for a rear of a sports SUV coupe, that's quite an unusual experience. The seats are very comfortable and supportive. I have acres of leg space. Just take a look at my knees. You could be, I would think, because I have a long torso, probably about 6'1" or 6'2" and still be very comfortable back here. And everything that's been laid out for you has been made to make you feel every bit as special as the front seat passengers. Look at the display options. So, your own heating and cooling controls, 2 charge points slightly lower down, and a 12 volt. That's going to come in handy if you want something a little bit bigger. And, well, still the ubiquitous storage area slightly lower down. But this is really where the detailing kicks in. Now, this has been designed to maximize your experience as 2 people back here. But if you're thinking, well, hang on a second, I really do want to have standard 3 seats back here, you can achieve that as well. You can swap out these seats for a standard 3-seat design at no additional cost. Here we have the chance to take a look at some different styling on the rear of this car. As you can see, this one has a very different approach. As we come down the design, we have color matching for the bodywork in the lower third, and we have a much more conservative square finish on the exhaust ports. And that looks a lot less dynamic and sporty than the model we were looking at earlier. As we come round to the side, we can pick up those style differences as well. We have colour matching happening here on the wheel arches and on this lower sill. Now, these are still 22-inch wheels, but visually they don't have nearly the impact as in the lighter weight one. Similarly, with this chrome trim around the window line, you don't have that bold, aggressive feel in the styling. Now, as Jonas comes back to show you the whole of this flank in one go, I think the most noticeable point about this is that you can't feel the 911 design language quite as strongly as you can with the lighter weight sports design. For me, that's a bit of a shame. The whole point with the coupe line is to really accentuate how this car is so very different from its standard SUV brother. And that's really brought out with that lighter weight sports design with the contrasting colors. You really can see the flow of the shape. So if you like the coupe styling, but you really don't want to make too big of a point of it, this is going to work for you. For me personally, there is no point going with the coupe styling unless you're going to make a big, bold statement about it. So I know which way I would go, but what do you think? What you're looking at right here is 2.16 square meters of glass panoramic roof. And as you can see, it's very difficult to detect that from the exterior. The idea is purely to present the roof as being gloss and black, and that is all you get visually. Really, this is about the experience from inside the car. So let's take a closer look in there and see how it delivers. Well, the roof of this car isn't the only place where the design differences are evident. Would it be wrong of me to suggest this is aimed at the slightly more mature driver? As you can see from the layout, it's a lot less dynamic, a lot less sporty. This really is designed at conservatism and I would say sophistication. So you have a lot of subtlety built in here, and I think that this is going to be very well accepted amongst people who are buying this car for appearance as much as for use. As far as the panoramic roof is concerned, once you get in here, it really is very impressive indeed. If Jonas swings the camera back a little bit, you can see the discrete blind that is built into the roof liner, and that comes all the way across from the back to the front to give you an experience that's entirely matching with what you want and the weather. As for my taste, well, I think you can probably already guess. My heart belongs to the sports. I mean, after all, if you're going to go with all of the design that comes with the coupe package, then I think you're going to want performance and interior to match. That design aesthetic follows through very naturally into the rear, and for me, this is where you really start to get a feel about the different potential uses for this vehicle. Whereas the back of the other vehicle that we looked at felt very dynamic, very sporty, this has much more of a finish feeling that this is a place where you would want to do business. So the sense that I have of the key distinction between the two vehicles is the earlier one, well, that really is the driver's car. This one, this is the executive car. So it is a question of styling and what you intend to use the vehicle for. With the coupe styling, for me personally, I want everything to be about speed and dynamism. But I can understand how a lot of users would like the aesthetic, but still very much want that business class experience in the back of the car. So the styling here is nice. I'm not sure it's quite my taste. If Jonas takes a swing through to the door, we can see an awful lot of chrome. Look at that massive Burmester speaker in the lower quadrant of the door. That's not quite going to be to everybody's taste, and it is making a very specific statement. However, I do think it's a really nice touch that so much attention has been put to offering different user experiences for different models of this car. After all customers aren't going to want the same thing, and I don't think that it's a wise move only presenting one alternative for your customer base. Well, come on guys, you know which way I'm leaning, but which way would you go? So how much is all of this design going to cost you? Well, prices for the coupe start from a little under 84,000, and they go all the way up to a little under 147. But wait, you're not done spending money there. There are a couple of optional extras you are definitely going to want to spring for. First of those is the air suspension. Add to that the dynamic cornering on the rear. Now that gives you an extra 3 degrees of active steering on the rear of the car. And in a car this size, that makes a very significant difference. Added to that, well, I've got to say I'm going to want to go with the custom color because, come on, you're not going to want to spend all of that money and then only have it look the same as everybody else's. So that's going to add around about 10,000 euro all in to that price. So that taken into account, really, this is not a cheap purchase, but I don't think it ever was intended to be. And if you have a look at the styling here, for me, this is everything that this car has to say. Sure, you don't have to go with the lighter weight pack that adds to the sport and dynamism. You don't have to go with the big engine. You can have your cake and eat it with the smaller engine and the cheaper car. But I have to tell you, for me, the big achievement in this car is not only how much of the styling and design DNA of a 911 has gone into this, and I really want to see that accentuated. So I really want to go with this contrasting matching to really make that design language pop. But I also want to get as much of that performance in there as possible. So although in general, I'm a huge fan of panoramic roofs, I think I'm going to go with the carbon here. It really looks fantastic and it makes you feel that you have something that's really very special indeed. This design language just really works if we accentuate the minimalism of the design and really bring out the sportiness. All of that said, clearly, a coupe is always going to be a slightly compromised design. What's very special about this car, to my way of thinking, is how much attention to detail has been put in delivering you as much of the comfort as you want that is actually achievable and possible. Nowhere can you see that better than that dropped rear seat that still gives you the headroom you want, and the contrast of this additional rear spoiler that not only works aesthetically, but really achieves the best in performance terms for this car. So, in pure design terms, for me, the coupe is an outstanding success. Whether or not you think it justifies the price tag by the time you've finished adding all the bells and whistles that you want, well, that's another question. But for now, I think it really is a superb entrant into the Cayenne lineup, and I can't wait to see how it drives. Well, that's everything from us for today. If you have any comments or questions, please put them below, please subscribe, and we hope we'll see you again soon.